The European Union Election Observation Mission to Nigeria has revealed that lack of transparency in the 2023 general election deflated public trust in the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Well, in a report released after the elections, the EU noted that the confidence earlier had in INEC's independence, professionalism, as well as voter information efforts decreased even before February 25th. Well, the agency, while the EU acknowledged that the election took place as planned, it said that operational failures which challenged the right to vote contributed to the reduced trust in the process.
To discuss these and other issues, we're now being joined by Dr. Sam Amadi, a RISE analyst. Dr. Sam, good evening. Thank you for joining us yet again.
Thank you.
Local observers, international observers are coming up with their reports. Unfortunately, hardly have the international observers come up with much of positive reports. Well, maybe say 2015. Now, public trust is the bone of contention now. Even before the elections, the public trust that the citizens had in INEC had dwindled very sharply. What are your opinions?
Well, first, public trust is important because if people don't trust the system, they won't come out to vote. If they don't trust the system, they'll be cynical about results of the system. Like correctly pointed out, one of the index we used, the Afrobarometer, had listed very poor public trust in the key institutions that drive elections. So, for example, INEC was around 23%, meaning that about 72% Nigerians said they don't have confidence in it. Now, this is 2022 report, meaning that in spite of the election, the technology, in spite of the diverse provision, they had only 23% of Nigerians say, maybe. Now, if you now look at what it will be now, if you do another survey, you might discover that maybe about 10% of Nigerians having the confidence. And now, this fits into participation. So when you see numbers showing that about 23 million people or thereabout voted out of 93 million registered voters, and it's 7 plus who collected at PVC, it speaks about trust in election itself. Now, if you look at trust in police, which is a critical driver of our election architecture, police protects the polls, ensure fairness. 15% Nigerians have confidence in police. If you look at ruling party, the president, for example, about 25%. So the only people who have very high, interestingly, high trust from the Afrobarometer measure is traditional rulers, about 60. And they come down. So what this means, therefore, is, first, Nigeria is now being classified officially as what they call electoral autocracy. So you do elections, but those elections really, the level of the democracy aspect of elections are no longer there. One, you see that it's difficult to remove incumbents because we need very competitive democratic elections to win incumbents, which means they have no resort to violence, they have no resort to police, they can't control police, can't control the military, and can't control the electoral umpire. Now, in this case, everybody thinks INEC failed, including INEC itself. So what that builds up to is that we're now going to get more downgraded. We used to be what they call hybrid democracy, which means we are democratic in form, but underlying it is logic of oppression, authoritarianism. Now we are now called competitive political electoral autocracy. I mean, after this election, further classification might bring us to no more, nothing about democracy. So it's interesting. Like in 2015, we saw some climb in public trust in the Electoral Commission. It moved. 2003-2007 election under who was it crashed, where people may not even be candidates and they get declared as winner. So it built up under Jega up to 2015. Okay, 2015 was height of it. Then since under Mahmoud, it nose dived. 2019 was problematic. Server, no server. The regulator of election could not be consistent and reliable. Many believe that probably Atiku Abubakar defeated President Buhari. but for the strategic rigging by INEC.
The same issues that the People's Democratic Party had raised in 2019, they're still raising it regards
Exactly,
to
technology,
that
simple
was used and the
server,
backroom server.
backing up something. They say, oh, we didn't have it. They say we had it. They say we didn't have it.
Okay.
Now we are talking about the same. So not about logistics or things that are complicated. Things that you deliberately didn't do, you could have done. So the problem is that INEC is going, and then democracy rating goes with trust institutions, rule of law component, investment.
I was coming to that. Investment. What does that do? I would just wanted you to land.
Yeah.
What will this do, this rating now do to affect investors' opinion and confidence in our economy? Capital flight, vis-a-vis capital flight.
Three things. First, because electoral illegitimacy creates conflicts, or where there's existing conflicts, it creates inability. It deprives states of effectiveness to manage them. So if the court does not give us some sense of closure, and the people feel angry after the Supreme Court, perhaps, people retreat to their strongholds. You have a complicated National Assembly where you don't have overwhelming majority. So what we're going to see is politics where the ability of the National Assembly, the parties, to aggregate interests and create a national platform, so maybe two broad interests, becomes fragmented. That's number one. Number two is that the investors, the U.S. and foreign government starts signaling. So if Biden wants to run on second term and is thinking about flagging America as a democracy promoter, it looks African continent. So where do we go to visit? Ghana, Rwanda, Angola. So Nigeria gets into a spot because this, you don't want to be so cozy with regimes or administrations that are generally perceived to have come with a kind of disputed mandate. So that's why you see some big international personalities send message, delete. Now, they are reading the fig leaf saying, should we or should we not? So if this contention continues, and now INEC has been thoroughly discredited, the entire community, for the first time, they came out with slam. So what that means that if the election regulator is totally discredited and the process has been discredited, it means that people will not see Nigeria as a star in democracy. It affects, because investment to third world, unlike other places, follow rating. In other parts of the world, especially except the extractive industry, where they don't care about wars, they can go to Iraq and Afghanistan. If you're going to deal with some of this new investment in ICT, investment, all those things that are more digitally inclined and respond to reputation, the rating is important. It also helps, it matches also with economic rating, the credit ratings we get, because the credit rating looks at overall macroeconomy and says, how will this country shape in the future? Will they be more stable or less stable? So all this will further damage our rating in terms of
Dr. Sam Amadi, this is an irony because, I say so because President Muhammadu Buhari is supposed to be conferred with an icon of democracy award by ECOWAS in the coming days. But at the end of the day, we've talked about the impact of this lack of trust for INEC from the people as well as the international community. But let's talk about the impact of this on the electoral process and the people who trusted it. Let's not forget 87 million people collected their PVCs. And going into that election, we were hoping to see a high number of turnout. But unfortunately, less than 13 million people actually elected the new president. But what sort of impact do you think this lack of trust, would have even in elections to come? The governorship elections particularly, especially as it has to do with young people.
I think it will damage their confidence. For example, the young people were very, very cynical about voting. Many people voted for the first time. And what drove this voting is the mystification of beavers and the electronic transmission. People like Mike again, they talked up the magic. INEC talked up the magic. So people say, look, we have confidence that we can actually use our vote to make a difference. So what you're going to see now is that confidence has gone down. So we're going to see that we're going to have much less participation in governorship election. Again, people would never thought that we'll be dealing with cancellation of votes, disputes around numbers. So now we are seeing people say, oh, A1, B1. All the three of them are claiming to win. The supporters believe that they all won. So P2B's obedience believe that they won this election and they were cheated. Atiku supporters believe they won and they were cheated. Now, what does that do to the psychology of first, that contention we won, destroys the credibility of electoral process. Because now, people are no longer relying on results. So if Saturday results come out, let's say a place like Lagos, okay, and maybe APC retains it or the obedience retains it, the obedience will likely say, this is the pattern. The votes didn't count. Or in Port Harcourt, maybe we can host strong or obedience trimmer. If obedience lose, so what they are seeing now is that either head or tail, the system loses. Nobody believes in the numbers anymore. Nobody believes in the man who counts the votes. And nobody believes that the votes that they get or the votes that the opponents get is actual votes.
So either way, whichever way the election goes on Saturday, what happened during the presidential election is beginning to give us a pattern of inconsistent electoral process.
The only thing that can help us a little bit is assuming INEC puts up the brightest face, gets delivered on time, no issues, beavers work A to Z. Now, the backlash will be people will say, oh, you guys deliberately
you could do it before.
But it will help them to say, okay, fine, let's assume they rig this election for strategic purpose. But they can actually run a good election.
Is INEC even doing enough, really, to win the confidence of the people back? Is it doing enough?
But the worst thing is, if it goes the same pattern, if it goes dispute over number, some mutilated papers, some papers being found in toilet, some result sheets fly in the air, if it gets, I mean, this is really disgraceful. It doesn't matter who wins. It doesn't matter who actually ought to have won. And the people don't understand that the process is more important than the outcome. And so when these guys look at Nigeria and say, this is really electoral autocracy, they're not looking at, is it Buhari who won or Atiku? They're not saying, is it Obi or Tinubu who won? They don't even say, who should have won, who is better, who is a good or bad. They're just saying, what are they doing here?
And for the fact that the Electoral Act, as amended in 2022, actually gave INEC, the powers, electronic transmission.
So much hope.
We have the beavers really to make this happen, but unfortunately, it is what it is.
You know what? We won't bother you about how to regain that trust in INEC.
But we
have to say thank you so much, Dr. Sam. We have to say thank you, Dr. Sam Amadi.